Good morning and welcome to the Computer Channel. Today's Dossier program is an introductory look at paperless trading, or as it's now being called, Electronic Data Interchange, or EDI. EDI is rapidly being embraced by all sectors of industry as a way of simplifying and speeding up business transactions. It replaces the traditional practice of one company printing out documents from its computer onto paper, posting them conventionally, and the sender then re-entering the information into a computer manually at the other end, a tedious process that can take weeks. EDI, on the other hand, takes seconds, replacing those paper documents with electronic messages. In the UK, a recent KPMG study shows that 50% of Time's top 1,000 companies now use EDI. And if you're currently doing business in Europe, you'll have to adopt EDI as a basic commercial tool within the coming months. Well, today I'm joined in the studio by three experts who eat, sleep and breathe EDI. Eliane McIntosh is a senior consultant with the Ovram Consultancy and co-author of the recent report on EDI. Ray Walker is Managing Director of Data Accord and a leading player in the standards world. Keith Willey is Principal Consultant with OTIB, Origin Technology in Business. Keith spent the last 4 years implementing EDI systems. Now remember, Dossier is a program where you can phone in and talk to my guests here in the studio. The number to ring is 081 681 5280. 081 681 5280. Well, the phone lines are now open, and we'll try and answer your calls in the 3 or 4 minutes we have between presentations. But first, Eliane McIntosh. Eliane has covered a wide range of telecoms issues during her time at Ovram. She's the lead author of a major published work on EDI. This morning, Eliane outlines the basics. What is EDI, how does it work, and what it can do for your company. Eliane.
It's hard to read the computer press now and not come across the term EDI on nearly every page. What exactly is EDI and why is there all this excitement about it? Let's look first at the official definition. According to the international body developing standards for EDI, Electronic Data Interchange, or EDI for short, is a transfer from computer to computer of commercial or administrative transactions using an agreed standard to structure the transaction or message data. The keywords are the electronic transfer from computer to computer. That means fast trading procedures which cut out expensive and error-prone manual procedures. That is what lies at the heart of EDI and its potential for the companies which are using it. That's a formal definition, but how does EDI work in practice? Here is a typical setup for two trading partners. The account system of company A, the customer, generates a purchase order. Instead of printing it out and mailing it to his supplier, company B, he processes the output from his account system through some EDI software. This translates the local data formats of the purchase order into a standard message format and syntax agreed upon by the trading partners. The message is then transmitted using a file transfer service to company B's DP system. The normal way to do this is to use a packet switch communication network to access an EDI clearinghouse service. The file waits at the clearinghouse for company B to pick it up. On arrival at company B, the standard message containing the purchase order information is translated by more EDI software into the company's internal formats. It is then processed by the local application in company B's DP system. In contrast, a purchase order received by mail will be entered manually into the DP system for processing. That is the essence of EDI. You can see that if you want to start EDI trading, you will need 5 things. First, a local computer application which generates and receives data. This is an obvious but fundamental point. If you don't use a computer for your administrative and commercial transaction, you can't realize the benefits which EDI brings. Secondly, EDI software to do the translation and provide the communication interface to the EDI clearinghouse service. Thirdly, hardware to run the EDI software. You can run it on your main DP system. But many companies, when they start, prefer to use a PC located between the main system and the network. Fourthly, access to an EDI clearinghouse service. And finally, a community of like-minded trading partners who also want to use EDI. It takes a number of companies to operate together before EDI becomes worthwhile. Our explanation so far has looked at the basics of the technical processes of EDI. But what is EDI used for in practice? Right now, most companies use EDI for what I call direct trading applications. That is, a buyer and a seller exchange data to trade goods and services. ordering and invoicing are the two main applications. Both involve the interchange of a number of different messages between the buyer and the seller. So, for example, as we see here, the ordering application might start with the buyer issuing a request for a quotation to the seller, who responds with a quote. The buyer then places an order, the seller informs him of the delivery date, and so on. But as well as the direct trading applications, there are also some exciting new developments in what I call trading support applications. These involve using EDI for the transport of goods, custom clearance of goods, and payment for goods. Let's look briefly at the last of these, the electronic payment service. Today, many companies use EDI to automate ordering and invoicing, the direct trading applications we have just talked about. But payment remains a time and energy-consuming task. This is where the EDI payment service comes in. As well as ordering goods and services by EDI, a customer also sends a payment order and a remittance advice to his bank using EDI. His bank then contacts the supplier's bank and arranges the funds transfer using EDI. Finally, the supplier's bank contacts the supplier the same way. Companies which are already operating direct trading applications can see significant benefits from a payment service for only a marginal extra investment in EDI. A payment service will help them reduce both their cash requirements by speeding up the flow of money and the number of clerical staff needed by automating several accounts processes. What are the benefits of EDI? It is fairly clear by now that EDI has three important characteristics. First, it leads to a faster transfer of trade data from one company to another by using data communication services rather than postal services. Second, it leads to error-free transfer of data. Because there is no rekeying or telephone ordering, there is less scope for error. And finally, it leads to a need for fewer staff to carry out routine manual processes. These three characteristics together lead to two very distinct types of benefits: cost reduction benefits and competitive edge benefits. Most large companies find it easy to cost justify their investment in EDI. Payback periods of 2 to 4 years are typical. The cost savings come from reduced labor cost. For example, one supermarket chain claims a 50% reduction in data entry staff because of EDI. Reduced stock levels. A French company claims that EDIs have helped it close 12 of its warehouses. Reduced cash requirements. Lower stock also means the company needs less cash. And in many cases, cost savings come from reductions in telephone and postal costs. Companies like Motorola and Hertz, for example, both report 25% reductions in their international telephone bills after implementing EDI. But EDI can offer competitive benefits as well as cost reductions. And these benefits come from the increased speed with which a company receives trade data and responds to them. So, for example, EDI can lead to a faster response to market trends. A supplier can react quicker to changes in customer requirements if he is monitoring retailer sales via EDI. It can also lead to shorter delivery times to customers, as the supply chain can react more quickly to an order. And it can lead to a wider choice of product for the customer. EDI makes just-in-time manufacturing much easier, bringing with it an ability to assemble standard components into customized products. How much do all these benefits cost? The hard cash costs are relatively low. The cost of the EDI software. This varies from £2,000 for a PC-based package to £15,000 for a mainframe package. A subscription charge of perhaps £30 to £50 per month to the EDI clearinghouse service, and a charge of 20 to 30 pence per message sent via the clearinghouse. However, the biggest investment you need to make is that of your time and of your colleagues. EDI does not present any real technical problems, but it certainly presents organizational challenges. So, for example, someone is going to need to spend time identifying how and where EDI can help your company, choosing the right EDI clearinghouse supplier for your trading community, modifying the procedures within your company to ensure that EDI is used effectively, ensuring that you have the right agreement with your trading partners so that EDI trading is secure and you all know what the rules are for resolving any disputes which may arise, training staff to use EDI, perhaps helping to build up your trading community so that you can switch from manual to electronic trading with as many of your trading partners as possible. Is it all worth it? That's a question which each company has to answer for itself. But I would certainly recommend looking seriously at EDI. In the last year, I have talked in depth to around 30 companies using EDI all over Europe. Some have used it for many years, some have just started, but none of them have regretted their decision to start EDI.
Thank you very much, Eliane. You've obviously talked to quite a wide variety of companies. Will you say there's a typical user of EDI?
A typical user of EDI would be a supplier of a large manufacturing company, for example, the suppliers of Ford or GM. And usually this supplier can be either a small company or a large one. And as EDI stands today, it probably has been coerced by its major customer to enter an EDI group, which very often is a hub and spokes formation, i.e. the hub company in the middle, who initiates the EDI development and orchestrates, so to speak, the whole EDI community. And it as well sets its own standards, its own proprietary standards. So that would be really a standard EDI community.
Do you think, though, that EDI is forced upon companies that really have no choice at all? They're forced to actually conform to the technology because their major trading partner has really sort of said, well, there's no other way to trade?
I think so. I think that many companies are faced, particularly small and medium-sized companies, are forced really by their smaller trading partner and are made an offer that they can't basically refuse. However, the benefits of EDI have become now obvious, and more companies are jumping onto the bandwagon because really they have to. EDI has become practically an act of faith, and it makes strategy. It makes commercial sense really to move into EDI now because the benefits are widely known, and because as well EDI has moved from proprietary standards and closed communities towards what we have called open EDI. It is not here, there. I mean, EDI based on universal standards, EDIFACT, and possibly X400 for communications. But it is moving firmly, significantly towards this ideal.
Ray, standards, something you've been involved with, and indeed so has Keith. We'll come to the Tradicom in a moment, really, but where do we stand in terms of standards in Europe?
Well, unquestionably, the EDIFACT standard is the standard for Europe. It has been adopted as a European standard as well as an international standard. And, of course, the European legislation requires public procurers to abide in accordance with that standard. So that I don't think there's any doubt that EDIFACT is the standard to come. But, of course, at present, there's already a base of other standards in this country. Tradicoms, for example, standard. It's probably more widely used than EDIFACT. But EDIFACT is the only international standard.
What's the sort of difference between the standards?
Broadly
speaking.
I suppose really the difference between the standards lies very much in the data directories and the coding system.
Yeah.
There are differences in the syntax, but it's really the data element directory which is quite critical to EDI. The EDIFACT standard is perhaps more rigid than the Tradicom standard. It's a more general standard. It is very much designed originally for international trade, but now it's being adopted and adapted for use in the situation which has previously been very fully occupied by Tradicoms.
Keith, do you think we'll see a position where perhaps the Tradicom standard would merge with EDIFACT, or is that not a technical possibility?
Well, they can't exactly merge as such, but you have to be careful because the syntax and standards are two different things. The syntax is the bit that goes round the outside, and you could put Tradicoms under an EDIFACT syntax if you wanted to, but I think for a long time to come the two standards are actually going to go alongside each other, because there are still many requirements in the UK for the use of Tradicoms for companies that don't have to involve themselves in Europe. And also there's the Tradicom standards are still evolving even now.
I suppose EDIFACT is it's in its infancy, I suppose. Is it, Ray? Really, it's a relatively new standard, isn't it?
It's a relatively new standard, yes, as standards go, certainly, yes. And I agree that the messages for EDIFACT are still being developed. And perhaps until a few months ago, there really was no alternative but to use trader comms for a number of transactions because the EDIFACT messages just weren't in place. But there are now a lot of EDIFACT messages being trialled.
Okay, well, obviously lots of different technical differences between, first of all, the standards. There's also presumably a security issue, because if you're part of an EDI network, you presumably have to make sure that what you have is a secure operation if you're plugging in and trading with other people. How important, how high on the priority list within the standards arena is security being placed? Eliane?
It is very important. Talking to users, in fact, I found that they were not frightfully worried about security issues. It is because really of the stage of development of EDI today, i.e. close communities, partners that know each other, very often have signed an interchange agreement. So the security is not an issue for them, but it will become an issue, and it is now treated really as quite a significant issue. And a lot of work is being done to introduce digital signatures, for example, as well the X400 standard, about which I spoke briefly, the communication standard, offers as well very good security features, particularly the 1988 version, which are going to be useful for EDI. A lot of work is being done by the member states and at the CC level by the TEDIS project.
Yes.
And another security issue that is being discussed as well is the offer of notary services that are going to be a kind of independent verification body, so to speak. It's a service that can be given by banks or by clearinghouse services.
How far have they got along with the digital signature? Because obviously a signature on a fax or electronic is not legally admissible, is it, on some documents? How far have they got down the line with actually getting around that problem, do you think?
They haven't. I mean, there is work is still. I have to say that work is still going on, really, because, for example, they are discussing whether signature should be on the file or the message itself. So it is still in its early stages.
Okay.
But
well, we'll go on to some of the points later on, which discuss about when you should introduce EDI into your company and a variety of other bits. We'll go on to that next. Well, my next guest is Ray Walker. Ray's Managing Director of Data Accord, a consultancy that specialises in the practical application, of IT. Today, Ray's here to talk about who benefits from EDI. Ray.
Before we discuss who can benefit from EDI, let's just recap on its characteristics. In an EDI system, the data is in machine-readable form and structured for machine processing without human intervention. Telecommunications will frequently be used to move the data, but it's certainly not an essential feature of EDI. If speed's not vital, the physical transfer of machine-readable media should not be spurned. It may be the most cost-effective method, and for large amounts of data, it may actually be the quickest. The situation will change radically as ISDN becomes available, but at present, biking over a few megabytes of data may be faster than sending it over the public network. Try doing the calculations. If telecommunications are not an essential characteristic of EDI, processing without human intervention is. It is the characteristic which distinguishes EDI from electronic messaging and provides the real benefits. It's also the main factor in speeding things up. Telex or fax can get messages there quickly, but their processing can still be delayed by manual handling, and this is the problem that EDI eliminates. Let's look at the considerations. Implementation costs should be reasonably easy to estimate. You can get basic software for a micro for under £1,000, but don't forget you also have to input the tables to use it. These map the standard interchange formats onto your internal database. Any decent package will include coding aids, but it may still be complicated and time-consuming. The costs of maintaining the system must not be overlooked. Message formats may be changed by international agreement, and you really have to keep in step whether the changes are of any interest or not. It's usually impossible to convert completely from paper, so that EDI will have to be operated alongside the old way of working, perhaps for years to come. Data transmission costs on the debit side implies that they will be higher than postage. At present, using vans, this is usually true. If ISDN2 is used as it becomes available, it could change the situation. Security should be considered when introducing any new system, but because different people are involved with electronic systems, different standards may be applied. As an example, the possibility of transactions being repudiated is often raised as an EDI issue. How often is it questioned whether an incoming order on paper is genuine and within the authority of the signatory? There are very few transactions for which papers and signature are essential, at least under English law, and if there are problems, businessmen will usually find a way around them. If you're dealing with officialdom, doing away with paper can be more difficult. Sometimes there may be a statutory requirement for a signature on a particular form. Sometimes it may just be an attitude of mind. In fairness, it has to be said that there are civil servants who are very enthusiastic about EDI, but before you invest in a system to interwork with government, make sure you're dealing with one of them. On the credit side, let's take the first four benefits together. They're all associated with getting rid of keying, but it's more than just saving staff. If, with a paper system, errors are thrown out during a batch run, tracing the source document and resubmitting it in a later run can cause all sorts of problems and delays. However, there is another side to this coin. There's no human operator to query the unusually large order caused by the omission of a decimal point. The EDI software can usually be relied upon to pick up any syntax errors in either input or output, but good credibility checking is vital. And if you don't have the paper, you don't have to look after it. Language independence stems more from the representation of data in coded form to prevent machine processing than the actual use of EDI, but let's not quibble. It's a valuable aid if you're trading internationally. EDI for output eliminates paper, together with the cost, storage, handling, collation, folding, enveloping, franking, and fire risk. In fact, it gets rid of almost all the untidy aspects of a computer operation. Each organization must make its own evaluation of these factors, but in any case, it's taking a far too narrow view. Adding the benefits which can flow from EDI can be conclusive. Improved stock and credit control can reduce capital requirements and improve cash flow. Better control over the movement of goods can reduce transport costs and shortages. EDI is almost essential for just-in-time methods which eliminate double handling. Perishables can come in fresher with a longer saleable period. Small businesses can cooperate and integrate their activities more closely. They can gain many of the advantages of a large enterprise without forfeiting their independence and flexibility. Even the customs like EDI, so it can reduce import and export delays resulting from the problems with the paperwork. But there can be other reasons for putting in EDI, even if it's impossible to cost justify. It may be the only way of doing the business. However, if large firms all insist on different EDI requirements, they can make life very difficult for small suppliers. It's not EDI, but if it comes to the worst, because EDI messages are structured, they can be printed out and processed manually. If volumes are very small, it's also just about practicable to hand code output and key it, so it is possible to cope without installing a full system. The vans may also be able to help at a price. Great though the benefits might seem for you, it takes two or more for EDI. Unless you have the clout to ensure cooperation or are prepared to devote effort to lobbying others, it may be better to wait rather than be too early. Of course, there must be some pioneers, and EDI is growing quickly, so hopefully this will not be a problem. And don't be too far behind, because while you're thinking about EDI, you're losing out on the benefits. Incidentally, although purists would not accept it as EDI because it all comes under single control, bear in mind that technique and software can be used to link incompatible application packages in-house or across different parts of an organization, perhaps following a merger until the systems can be fully rationalized. And when you do go for EDI, make sure it's with the right syntax for your environment. EDIFACT is the recognized international standard, and it's the standard for Europe. It will gain ground, but for historical reasons, there are probably more tradercoms than EDIFACT users in the UK at present. There are also some other more specialized systems. the use of more than one syntax may be more or less essential, at least during a period of transition. Software is available that can do this, but maintaining several sets of tables can be something of a burden. Direct translation can be difficult, even impossible, because there are not always direct one-to-one equivalents for the data in different systems. Because the driving forces behind EDI have been mainly commercial, indeed some definitions of EDI even include the words business data within them, it's easy to overlook that there are many other applications. For example, the librarians have developed an international EDI standard covering most of the interlibrary transactions, such as interlibrary loans. These will operate internationally. There's also intense activity at present on the application of EDI to healthcare. Initiatives will range over medical data flows, medical records, and the interaction between monitoring and computer-controlled equipment, as well as the commercial aspects such as administration and procurement. Improved data on the effectiveness of treatments and drugs, which EDI will make practical to collate internationally, are likely to be a benefit to all of us. In the application of EDI to healthcare, there will doubtless be some human as well as technical problems to overcome. Among the technical challenges is the manner in which the results of X-rays and other scans can best be represented for machine processing, not just for storage and printing. A similar problem also arises in engineering, where a request for a quotation may have to include a three-dimensional representation of a product, together with the specifications for the materials to be used in its construction. Another engineering EDI application is the use of output from a computer-aided design system as input to a computer-controlled machine tool, thus bypassing the need for engineering drawings. Most existing business systems are based on batch processing, partly to use existing investment, but also because EDI has to operate alongside paper systems, for which batch is best suited. Using EDI in conjunction with transaction-driven systems, in which transactions are processed individually and immediately as they occur, leads inevitably to the concept of interactive EDI. In interactive EDI, the processing of one computer may be modified by messages from others. As an example, on reaching reorder level, a computer running a stock control system might send requests for quotations to a number of likely suppliers. The stock control computer could then evaluate the responses based, say, on price and delivery dates, and then send an order message to the chosen supplier. It could all take place in seconds without any human intervention, and of course the whole process could then propagate upwards.
Thank you, Ray. The point you mentioned there about maintaining the system, keeping up with message formats and legislation and everything else, sounds an expensive business. I mean, how do you do that? I mean, once you get onto the bandwagon, you're forced to really update and change as you go along, are you?
Pretty well, I think. The international community are now setting down procedures to try and limit the number of changes that will occur and will allow a rollover period for people to change their message formats. But I think it's inevitable during this period of development that we've got this. As new messages come along, people realize that they might have done something they've already done a little bit better, and so they make the change. And of course, we're now getting a slight conflict arising because those that haven't yet implemented EDI obviously want the best that's available, and those that are already using it and exploiting it say, why change? It's fine. We're using it already. We don't want to make a change. So quite an interesting situation is developing, but it is being controlled.
Keith, have you had that sort of experience in the sort of uses of the last 4 years? You've probably seen a lot of this, have you?
Well, that's right, yeah. I mean, usually you're forced to keep at least two versions of the same message going all the time. Sometimes more, though. You try to encourage people, and even the standards bodies will try to encourage people to move on to the newest version of the standard. Of course, they don't have the power to make people do it, and so it's really down to the individual companies. Now, if a trading relationship has been going for years on one version, bolted into a black box on a PC, there's no real incentive for them to change it. So, I mean, as long as it doesn't affect anybody else, although it's not desirable, it's likely to remain like that. With pure EDI, with its sort of mainframe to mainframe, then it's up to the two trading partners to get their heads together and agree a time scale and by which they will translate from, say, version 6 to 7 to 8 or whatever. So it's difficult. You will always have to run with more than one version because that's the way it's played. Those that have been on there for a long time are less likely to move. Those that come on afresh will want to come on to the latest standard.
Is that the case, Eliane? Do you find that within your... Do people have different
It is
attitudes from
indeed.
one country to the other, or is there very much sort of common thinking on it?
Well, it's rather interesting, the development, looking at Europe as a whole, because the UK is a pioneering country and the most advanced country as far as EDI is concerned. And they pay the pioneering price because they have got already Tradecom standard. There is as well another standard, ODET, which is used in the automotive industry. Now, the French, for example, and the German and the Italian and so on are starting now. I mean, there are approximately 3,000 users in the UK and maybe 500 only in France and Germany each. So they can start straight away with the universal standard. So it is different. I mean, and UK companies, for example, will have probably to maintain both, sometimes three standards. I mean, but at least Tradecoms and EDIFACT to trade with the rest of Europe.
Ray, obviously maintaining a paper-based system as well as an electronic system can lead to quite a nightmare, especially when your perception of EDI is something that replaces paper anyway. How do you decide what to computerize and what to keep based on paper?
Well, I think the decision is made for you, wherever EDI is practicable. As Eliane has said, the essential features are other computer users. If your invoices are being printed by a computer, they're coming into you, printed by somebody else's computer, then this is an obvious application to computerize, change over to EDI. But if your trading partners aren't using computers, then you can't make the change to EDI. And again, volumes are important. If you've got large volumes coming in from one or two people, then again, they're obvious targets. The 80-20 rule applies, usually. 80% of the transactions are coming in from 20% of your customers or suppliers, and those are the ones to go for.
I suppose what I'm really after is what sort of audit should you carry out internally to sort of get yourself fit and lean and mean for EDI implementation, really?
I don't think there's really any background audit that's required as such. You might be able to change your internal systems, but because you're unlikely to be able to roll over completely from paper to EDI, you're going to have to operate the EDI. You're going to have to find some way of bringing those EDI transactions into your system alongside paper, and similarly for output.
You mentioned ISDN too. I mean, how will that change people's perception of EDI?
Well, that's going to be very interesting because ISDN2, of course, is financially very cost effective. It's currently priced in this country. You can show savings of perhaps 1 to 40 if you use ISDN compared with the switched public network. But of course the driving force for EDI introduction here has been the VANs and the VADs. And they're not going to want to see the business go away from them to public networks. So it's going to be a very interesting situation. And of course, the VANs and VADs do a lot. They will hold the messages, they'll sort them so that you can just pull out your orders or your invoices when you want them. They'll provide a notary service, as already been suggested, and that isn't going to be available for the public network. But nevertheless, there are very large cost savings possible, I think.
Keith, you anticipate some sort of competitive war going on in the next year or two then?
I think it'll all get more and more competitive, and like with all things, as things get more popular and more competitive, then prices will come down, we hope anyway.
Got to be good news for users, presumably.
Well, that's right, yes. Although I would still say it's best to get in as soon as you can rather than wait, because if you wait, then you're not going to reap the benefits that you can get now, even though the prices may be lower and the facility is better in a few years' time.
Eliane, will that perhaps sort of make more people's perception of EDI more acute now? They'll probably be thinking more seriously about it, purely from the cost point of view.
Or because they are, you mean reduction of cost?
Indeed.
So the benefits. Yes, I think so. And I mean, as I have said already, the benefits are becoming really much more widely known. And I think that companies are getting ready. I think that all large companies now in Europe are either using EDI or implementing it or thinking seriously about it. And within about 4 years time, I believe that most large companies in Europe will be using EDI.
Okay. Well, later on in today's programme, Keith Willey presents a user's view of EDI. But first, to look at last week's EDI show held in London's Queen Elizabeth II Conference Hall. Alex Lester talked to AT&T's Phil Cotup and asked him just how far EDI technology has come.
Well, the show is a very good way of measuring progress in the industry. We've been involved in this show for since right at the start in 1987, and then it was all to do with the pioneers, breaking ground on technology, etc. Now if you go around the show, it's more to do with what EDI is really about, applications and getting business benefits from offering and using EDI services.
How serious is the current interest in EDI?
I think it's very serious. We started off with the pioneers, the people who were moving back the boundaries of technology, and now we're getting, I think it would be wrong to call them followers, but people who are using the technology in their everyday business. So we're getting key management, key people involved in putting EDI in their everyday business at the show, and they're here today.
Among the main users of EDI is British Airways. Ron Webber is Purchasing Systems Manager.
How integral is EDI to your purchasing strategy?
It's an extremely important part of our strategy, but it depends on which industry that we're dealing with as to whether EDI is important or not. Some industries are very slow in adopting EDI as a strategy for them to pass information between the various constituents of that industry. And in those, we have alternative strategies that we will apply until such time they become more mature and move into EDI.
Would you prefer to buy off a company that uses EDI than one, for instance, that doesn't?
Oh, there are definitely substantial advantages in us dealing with a company that can provide us with EDI facilities.
Do you actually insist that everyone with whom you trade use EDI?
We don't insist at the moment because some industries are more advanced than others, some are less advanced.
Of course, you've always got to be clear about the benefits the technology is bringing you.
It's given us an ability to provide a much better service, as we've mentioned. It's allowing us to streamline our order processing. It's allowing us to take some paper out of the back end of the invoicing side. But again, so you must put that into context with the fact that the customers we're dealing with on EDI only form less than 10% of our customer base. In the longer term, it's likely that our plans for EDI will involve a heavy internal EDI loading. Because we're vertically integrated, we have an enormous flow of documentation and information between our producers and our retailers. And that area is one we see as being a big area for the future of EDI and BAS.
How do you see your use of EDI developing in the future?
We have attacked the supply chain from both ends. We are, in fact, receiving orders now from people like Tesco's and feeding them into our order processing systems and our distribution systems in the same way as we feed other orders. We've also attacked the other end of the chain through the invoice side, actually passing invoices out. What we have to do is to attack the middle of that chain, which is the big element, and look at the logistics side of the business, how we actually supply, how we deal with our customers and suppliers in a much more proactive way in supporting their businesses as well as our own.
What still needs to happen for EDI to become fully implemented in the United Kingdom?
Well, we've come a long way, but we've got a lot of work to do to make it easier for people to get involved. It's still quite hard work. You have to grapple with a new way of doing business, and the technology is just coming in place now so that you can do it in a standards way. So we need standard software, standard networks, and standard applications to make it easier to build the EDI applications and make computers talk to each other in a useful way.
You mentioned standards. How close are we to standards with EDI?
Well, the trouble with standards at the moment, we've got so many of them. Everyone wants to adopt standards as long as they're their own standards. We've done a lot of work implementing EDIFACT, which is the new international standard, which is just coming into everyday use. But we've got a long way to go, especially on a global scale. But we'll get there. We're making good progress, I think.
I have with me in the studio 3 EDI experts, Eliane McIntosh, Ray Walker and Keith Willey. If you'd like to ask them any questions, then the number to ring is 081 681 5280. 081 681 5280. Well, my final guest is indeed Keith Willey. Keith is Principal Consultant with OTIB, and he's spent most of the last 4 years at the user end of the EDI equation. Keith.
As we've heard, Electronic Data Interchange provides the means to exchange business data between two computer applications regardless of system differences and physical distances. It is a universal language for exchanging business information anywhere in the world. Put simply, EDI is paperless trading. Many areas of industry and commerce are involved. Indeed, EDI encompasses the whole of the distribution chain, from manufacturer through to consumer. So why do companies get involved in EDI? In our experience, companies usually get involved either because they are being pressured by someone else or because they have woken up to the benefits that EDI can give. Those benefits can be either direct or applied. Direct in that they improve the efficiency and reduce the cost of the transactions themselves, and applied because we can improve the way we carry out our business as a result of the improved transaction handling. Furthermore, when considering EDI, we have found that there is market advantage to be gained if you are quick off the mark. But more important than this, companies are starting to say that no EDI means no business. So, if you are not being pressured by a trading partner, how do you decide who to approach? EDI does not necessarily have to be done with someone from outside your own organisation. There are a number of occasions where it may be appropriate to start things from within. Perhaps you have to handle an international supply chain, as would a major multinational company, or maybe your organisation is fragmented over a number of offices up and down the country. On the other hand, you may have disparate computer systems, possibly as a result of a recent takeover or merger. If, however, none of these factors apply to you, it is time to look at your trading partners. If you are new to EDI, it is best to get involved with someone who has a bit of experience, because they will be able to give you advice. You should choose one of your major trading partners. Find someone with whom you have a simple trading relationship. You don't want to have to try and incorporate complex bells and whistles at the first time of asking. And finally, choose someone where the benefit is going to be the greatest. For example, a partner with whom you exchange a large volume of order lines. Having made that decision, how do you go about using EDI? There are both business and technical issues to face. On the business side, there are three main areas of activity. First, you have to sell the idea of EDI to your own organisation. Then, you have to get over the obstacles that people will put in your way. And finally, you have to go and talk to the trading partner you have chosen, because EDI can also change the way you trade. In selling EDI to the business, you must create awareness and get commitment from the top, giving EDI a high profile. Sell EDI to the business, by the business, from the top down. There have to be sound business reasons for going ahead. This will lay the foundation for getting the system right. It is fatal to build the system first and then to try to make the business fit. Education and training are vital. EDI is a new world in which everyone must have some understanding. You must get involvement in EDI across all levels within your organisation. You must understand the costs. EDI is not necessarily cheap to install, and it doesn't happen overnight. Some of the benefits may take a little time to materialise. Nevertheless, many major corporations are already involved in EDI and are committing investment well into the future. Always remember that the more you do, the less it costs and the more you benefit. Most of the obstacles you will come across are people-oriented. EDI imposes disciplines some people do not necessarily want. Gone are the opportunities for the wheeler-dealer and the one-off deal. Paper gives people visibility and a sense of importance. EDI gets rid of this. No longer have they got something to wave as they stride around the department. EDI can also threaten both jobs and empires. This doesn't always have to be so. People can be redeployed into previously neglected areas. There is an inherent mistrust of new technology. This has to be overcome. Selling EDI to the business by the business will help. There is a requirement for trust and openness with your trading partner. To many business relationships, this is one of the last things they consider. Finally, there may be a need to work with your competitor. Cooperation with a competitor is something totally foreign to many businesses, but one of the most effective ways of getting EDI off the ground is to promote it within an industry sector, especially if you can do it through a recognised trade association. When talking to your partner, you may find that EDI will not be a simple continuation of what went on before. There may have to be changes in the way a partnership works. There is an opportunity to move away from historical, antiquated procedures. The communication process in your organisation will need to be examined, as EDI expects much tighter control over product and location coding. An agreement should be made on how EDI will work, what information is going to be exchanged, by what method and how often. Discussing this EDI agreement will lead you into the technical issues surrounding the implementation of EDI. There are 4 main questions to be asked. How will I connect to my partner's computer? What message standard should I use? What hardware platform should I use for my EDI solution? And what software should I use to get from my application to the message standard? Trading partners can exchange information by sending magnetic tapes or diskettes to each other. But to reap the full benefits of EDI, electronic links between computer systems are necessary. Such links pose problems, however. Different computer manufacturers use different communication protocols. Also, the more trading partners you have, the more links you need. The solution to these problems is a value-added network called the VAN. These perform the functions of an electronic post office and enable EDI to work on a large scale. VANs are designed to interface to all manufacturers' machines, thus providing you with one link to all your trading partners. There are 3 main players in the UK: INS with TraderNet, Mistel with Edict, and IBM with the Information Exchange. There are also 3 main message standards in use in the UK. These standards allow companies to talk the same language to each other, with strict definitions of what each piece of data means. Tradercoms is the most widely used in the UK. It was born out of the retail trade, but has grown to encompass almost every sector of business. The automotive industry have a standard of their own called ODET, designed for use throughout Europe and for their own specific needs. More recently, an international initiative was started involving standards bodies in many countries. Out of this was born EDIFACT, the ultimate standard for international trade, but still very much in its infancy. In order to connect to the VAN and to translate your application data into the standard message format, you must first decide what hardware platform to use for this software. The VANs have software available for connecting to most major machines, mainframes, minis and PCs. There is also a variety of software on the market that will translate application data into standard formats. It is not recommended that companies write their own. It simply isn't worth the trouble. In conclusion, to be successful in EDI means working as a team, both with your partner and your competitor. To fully reap the benefits of EDI, you will need to become proactive, to go out and seek new partners yourselves. In the very near future, EDI will play a crucial role in accomplishing corporate objectives. EDI is already becoming a must for remaining competitive in national and global markets. Within a few years, all routine business transactions will be carried out using EDI.
Thanks very much, Ray. Well, in, I'm sure, 4 years, it hasn't all been roses. What sort of things can go wrong in the early days of implementation of EDI? Things that people should look out for as potential trouble spots.
The major mistake a lot of companies make is by doing it from the technicians upwards. So you get a big push from the technicians who are very keen on something that's new, but it's something that the business people don't understand. If it gets pushed from up there, you never get the right amount of cooperation to make it really work. And then the systems that you end up don't really do the job, and you don't get the full benefits. I think that's the main lesson to be learned.
Who generally initiates the idea of perhaps using EDI internally?
Probably the area that's most at the moment is very much a buyer-seller sort of thing. That's the main interest, and so usually those sort of areas are the areas where the most cost savings are. Sort of getting rid of the paper in your order desk, that sort of thing, and it's probably there that the most push comes. Although in a lot of cases, if a company takes on board EDI from the top, it will go out and then say to all its suppliers, right, you will now do EDI with me, and then it becomes a very global thing. And a lot of people on the other end have to do it whether they like it or not.
Eliane, it's a very political thing, isn't it, going towards a network of competitors, if you like, just to share the technology. Is there political inhibitions to be overcome, actually, in terms of working with EDI?
Between companies that compete really commercially? Well, yes, this is one of the miracles, really, that EDI has performed, so to speak, to force competitors to collaborate and not really try to fight each other, so to speak, because they have to sit around a table, agree on a standard, agree on the security and legal issues and so on.
It's a pretty tall order, though. I mean...
Yes, but it is happening because there is no choice, because they have to collaborate, because the market is becoming a global market, and these rather parochial fights between competitors have to take second place, so to speak. But you can still be competitors and do EDI. And for example, large groupings of EDI users have formed recently, for example, CEFIC in the chemical industries. They are all competitors, and they have collaborated. They are still collaborating to form one of the EDI communities that may become one of the largest in the world.
Ray, do you think we're a bit too parochial in this country in terms of getting together with our competitors, and especially Europe?
No, I don't know. I did come across an interesting situation some years ago, actually. This was a financial background, and the suggestion was that EDI should be used for obtaining quotations. And the idea would be that the buyer would be able to poll out to a whole lot of suppliers from their computer, seeking quotations. They'd all come in. And the supplier's reaction to that was, that would mean a perfect market. That's the last thing we want. So I think that there are various considerations, but actually competitors will surprisingly often cooperate when it's to their mutual advantage. And we have to realise that over here, many of our organisations are quite small. And EDI really does give them the opportunity to work together and have the benefits of being a large organisation without actually going through a merger.
How good is the awareness of those points, though? I mean, who's selling those points? Is the DTI promoting it? How are they getting information?
Yes, the DTI is trying very hard to promote EDI, and so indeed are the European Commission. They both have projects running. So there is a realisation of how important EDI is to a competitive trading community.
Presumably, Keith, you've merely automated existing trading procedures. Is that the case, or have you had to set up new trading procedures to cope with the technology?
Well, certainly EDI will change your business practices, particularly in the realm of product coding. And what people will say that part and parcel of EDI, though you can do it without it, is to bring barcoding and EAN coding into play, where you can get benefits on the shop floor and in the warehouse through coding up, and that would change practices, because instead of writing things on a bit of paper, you're wiping a barcode, and then that would change the way you work quite considerably.
What role does the IT manager have to play in all this?
I think he has to play a role of talking to the business and selling it to the business and getting them to see what the benefits are, so that he can get backing from the top. I mean, if he can't get backing from his main business players in his organisation, then he's going to have a struggle from the word go. If he can get backing at the beginning, it's going to make life a lot easier if the man at the top is actually saying to everybody else, well, you will do it, chaps, you know. That's his main role, I think.
It's all about education. I mean, obviously training is in there in a great big way, but
yes.
What is the education flow, in a way, by actually educating the IT guys about the business objectives of that company, in terms of, I mean, the two are probably far closer within EDI than they are with any other piece of technology.
That's right. I mean, the two certainly have to sit down and get to know each side of the business. I mean, when we go out and talk to a potential trading partner, we always take technicians and business people with us. It's never the techies talking to the techies and the business talking to the business. You do the two together, and you learn from each other as you talk to each other. So that the technicians always know how the business procedure works and how the real business takes place, and at the same time the business people can start to understand the technical process of EDI, and then realise, you know, what is involved and what they have to do to bring it about.
What sort of attitude do people have towards training, Ray, in terms of EDI? Is it something they feel they can muddle through, or is there some sort of formal approach to it?
I think this depends very much upon the organisation. I think, as Keith has already said, the essential feature is support from the top. That's true of any computer application. You really need the enthusiasm, the interest of the man at the top. And if he shows his interest, everybody's going to make sure it works properly. And of course, training is an essential part of it.
are people frightened of, again, we come back to this issue of cost, even though obviously we're talking about increased throughput and actually the business operations becoming cheaper using EDI. But it's certainly in today's climate is something like training a cost that people think they can do well with that?
I don't think so. I think people realise they're looking for a quick payback on EDI with justification, a 2-year payback or something of that sort, which is a good return on investment by any standard. And I think that they recognise that it's better to do the job properly. But of course, time constraints are always the problem, and resources. There's always competition for resources. A firm might be under pressure to put in an EDI system quickly, and they might cut the corners. They might get away with it, they might not.
Finally, Eliane, if we could sort of finish up with you, we've covered virtually every other area apart from getting to the point where you actually pick the supplier of the EDI systems and services. Is it a highly complicated thing, or are there very clear guidelines about how to approach it? If you're trading internationally, obviously you're covering one company. I mean, how do you go about picking the supplier for your systems?
Well, picking the supplier in the UK was fairly straightforward because there are two people sharing the market. I mean, two companies, INS and AT&T Estel, with IBM being in third place because they entered the market rather late. I think that things are going to become more complicated now because we are coming out of that rather cozy EDI user group in the UK. And lots of companies are entering the market. I mean, Ray mentioned the public network companies.
Yes.
They are all entering the market. BT launched an EDI service about a week ago. Transpac is already in the market in France, and in Germany as well, the PTT is launching an EDI service. I think that within about 5 years, there will be maybe 5 pan-European players, multinational players, including people like GEIS, IBM, and BT TimeNet, Infonet, and so on. But I believe that within the national countries, I mean within the national perimeters really, except in England where INS and AT&T still already have got firm ground, the national telco will be one of the key national EDI providers because of the image, because as well that users can trust their strategies, that they are going to look after their national users. And I think that they will also endeavor to always have an international dimension. For example, most of the European PTTs who are going to offer a national EDI clearinghouse service have got a share in Infonet, which is a very large pan-European multinational network provider offering both EDI services and other value-added services. So I think I see a development of this sort. So from the user point of view, yes, it is difficult. It is difficult and it is not, because I mean he will know whether his first EDI community is going to be a national one, and then he will have to go to this trusted national provider with a good image. In France, it could be Transpac. Here, it could be AT&T, Stella, INS. And very often as well, the established providers have acquired a reputation in particular industry niche. For example, AT&T is still in manufacturing and INS in retailing. They were the first large users of the first user groups really using EDI in a big way.
Obviously, things are about to take off in a big way. That's very encouraging to know. Anyway, we'll see what happens in the next year or two.
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, again, sadly, that's all we have time for today. I'd like to thank my guests, Eliane McIntosh, Ray Walker and Keith Willey, and of course you for watching. I'll be back on Thursday morning at 9:30 with analysis. I hope you'll join me. Until then, it's goodbye from the Computer Channel. Goodbye. Thank you.